Just to give you some kind of an idea of how much money people spend on these kinds of things, in human medicine, if we're just talking about herbal preparations, and these are things that you'll walk into Whole Foods or Kroger and go into the aisle that smells good and pick some things off the shelf. It's anywhere between $5 and $6 billion a year. That's for people. For horses, I'm pretty sure most of our horses, as opposed to most people, take some sort of supplement in their feed. And while it's not a $5 billion a year industry, it's a multi-million dollar a year industry, even if you just limit it to glucosamine and chondroitin. And so, we're spending an awful lot of money on these things, and to be perfectly frank, there's not a lot of evidence that they're really efficacious, and efficacy depends a little bit on which product that you use. So, with that said, a little bit of a spiel to start, I'll tell you what I did. I went shopping in my kitchen and at TSC. And so what we're going to do is go through some products that are very commonly administered to horses and talk about, is there any evidence of efficacy? Can this hurt my horse? Which, for us, is a bigger problem, is a bigger concern. Whenever we're talking about something in which there's not a lot of evidence for efficacy, we subscribe to the first do no harm principle. And so I think it's pretty important that people know when they're giving something that might potentially hurt, like giving us some of these strollers. We know you took it. We know you took it. We know you took it. Thieved it. Okay, so we're going to start with Grand Hoof, pellets, and MSM. The first thing that I would suggest that you do when you go to buy any supplement is read the label. And of course, we'll talk in a minute about the ways in which labels can be misleading in this venue, but I'll read you what the label says here. Active ingredients, MSM, which is methylsulfonylmethane, methionine and lysine, which are both amino acids, neither of which are limiting in horse diets, meaning a horse that gets a normal amount of protein in its diet will have adequate concentrations of that. Active dry yeast, which most people will include as a source of B vitamins. Zinc, copper, biotin, and vitamin B6. Do we have any questions about any of those? Okay. We'll give you the real scoop here. So MSM is an anti-inflammatory, which hasn't been shown to be absorbed well from the equine GI tract. It's commonly included in a lot of joint supplements, but there's no data to suggest that it modifies the course of disease, say with a horse with arthritis, or that it makes them any more comfortable. You can actually buy this, I don't think I did, but you can buy this, just MSM, in a tub about this size, and feed it as a single agent. Biotin. Biotin is commonly administered as a supplement to improve hoof quality. And again, there's not a lot of evidence there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that people say, I put my horse on this supplement and their hoof quality got better, they stopped cracking, they were less flaky, they were firmer. But again, there's not a lot of science to support it. Vitamin B6. Vitamin B6, obviously, is a B vitamin. And you'll see there's also active dry yeast in here. We'll tell you that horses rarely develop diseases referable to vitamin B deficiencies because, unlike you or I, they have this huge fermentation vat in their colon. And the microbial flora in their colon actually produces a lot of different B vitamins, both in number and in quantity on a daily basis. So horses rarely have vitamin B deficiencies. So, in the vein of things that aren't going to hurt anything, vitamin B is a water-soluble vitamin, and there's no real toxicity associated with it. So it's very safe to give that, but it's rarely necessary. So, something to think about. There's lots of people injecting vitamin B into horses as an appetite stimulant, as a calming agent, which again, there's not a lot of evidence to suggest that's helpful, but it's rarely going to be limiting for most horses. So you might look at this and say there's multiple sources of B vitamins on here, my horse probably doesn't need those. So save myself this $30 and buy 2 bales of hay. It's about like $30 a buy right now. It's true. All right. Next in the box. I stole my husband's chondroitin. This is actually this is actually my husband's, he's training for this marathon, and he swears up and down that his glucosamine and chondroitin is keeping his knees intact. And I, being a good wife, bite my tongue and say, I hope your knees feel better, honey, because, and I will say, this is, glucosamine and chondroitin is the most commonly, is the supplement that we get questions most frequently regarding this supplement. As far as dollars, this is the type of substance that people spend the most money on. And a couple things. None of these nutritional supplements are regulated by the FDA. And so there's no guarantee that what's on the label is actually in this bottle or in this bucket or in any of these tubs here. And that's because there's no mandatory FDA purview of any of these things. And actually, there was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, no, 5 or 6 at this point, there was a kind of a fun little study that some veterinarians in California did. They put together, they went into a feed store and plucked 5 or 6 different glucosamine chondroitin supplements off the shelf, blinded the labels, and measured chondroitin sulfate concentrations in all of them. And we were just talking about this before y'all got here. The concentrations went from 0% all the way to 120% of the label what that said that was in there. And it just goes to show there's no quality control over them. So they're not inexpensive, and there's no guarantee that you know what you're getting. Whereas if there's if you use a substance like Adequan or Legend, those actually are FDA approved with a label for use in the horse. And there's a guaranteed concentration and guaranteed analysis on those products. Granted, those aren't orally administered, but if you're going to spend the money to give those things to your horse, it actually might be a better option to give them something that has a guaranteed analysis to it. The other thing to consider with glucosamine and chondroitin is absorption. We don't have a lot of good evidence that they're absorbed well from the equine GI tract. And so the evidence for efficacy is a little sketchy. It's not great. They're very unlikely to do any harm. So again, in the vein of first doing no harm, you're very unlikely to hurt anything by giving your horse a glucosamine and chondroitin supplement. But if you're getting a tub like this and it costs you $120 a month to give your horse Cosequin, there may be better ways to accomplish that. A word about Cosequin before I go on. Cosequin is made by, there's a whole family of products made by that company. The company's name is Nutramax. And Nutramax actually voluntarily does subject its products to analysis. And so while it's not FDA approved, and there's no FDA requirement for it, Nutramax actually is a company that submits its products for quality control. So, at least with Cosequin, there actually is some evidence to suggest that what you're buying is actually in the tub. So, while certainly none of us have any financial ties or research ties or anything like that to Nutramax, whenever we get a question about that, that's usually the recommendation that we'll make, with all the caveats that go along with it. So, say this one, Do More Liquid Flex. Sounds fancy, sounds good. This is glucosamine hydrochloride, chondroitin sulfate, and MSM, yucca flavored. Incidentally, yucca is an herbal remedy that some people will use for its anti-inflammatory effects. And I picked this one out because it sort of made me chuckle that it doesn't say it contains yucca, it's yucca flavored. So, anyways, this is enough for an adult horse for maybe a month, and it's $30 worth of medication. Again, no guarantees that what's on the label is actually in the bottle. No guarantees that the horse absorbs it. Again, if I was going to recommend giving a horse glucosamine or chondroitin or hyaluronic acid, I would spend the money and inject it. First of all, you obviate the need for any kind of absorption, right? You don't have to worry about GI absorption because you're not giving it through the GI tract. That said, none of these things are going to hurt a thing. Questions about that? That's the big one. Everyone always asks about that one. Okay.